Ever wondered how scientists can learn big things just from studying one person?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how much we can find out.
Psychology has been doing this for ages, using two main methods.
Case studies and single case experiments.
Our deep dive today is all about those.
Kind of break down how they work, what they're good for, and what their limitations are.
Exactly, so you can be a more critical thinker, right?
Spot on.
Let's jump right into case studies.
Those deep dives like a biography but for science.
Our source material, Shaughnessy Chapter 9, has this incredible example, Gashu the chimp.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one.
He went through some awful things before being rescued.
Years, actually, like 7, maybe 8, of just terrible treatment.
Isolated bad weather, used as a tourist attraction.
He was just cruel.
The psychological impact must have been huge.
Unimaginable, really.
So how did researchers even begin to figure out how he was doing psychologically?
Interviews with his caretakers, mostly.
Makes sense.
And very carefully watching his behavior. They used a checklist, actually.
The checklist.
Adapted from human psychopathology to see how he reacted to different things.
And what did they find?
It's a bit tough to hear, but he showed a lot of behaviors that are similar to PTSD in humans.
Oh, wow.
Easily startled, constantly anxious, avoiding certain people or places.
Like he was always on edge.
Exactly, always on alert for danger.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it gets worse. He seemed to have these dissociative episodes.
Dissociative episodes.
It was like he'd lash out, attack parts of his own body.
Like he didn't recognize himself.
It seemed like it, yes.
That's so sad. It really makes you think about the long-term effects of trauma.
Absolutely.
Even in animals.
Gashi's case makes you wonder,
About how trauma affects chimps long-term.
It could even give us some clues about PTSD in humans, too.
That's a good point.
This is one of the strengths of case studies. They can help us understand complex things in a very specific way.
Like generate new ideas for research.
Exactly.
But can we really say for sure that his early trauma caused all of his problems? Just from this one case.
That's where it gets tricky. It's hard to be absolutely certain about cause and effect, right?
Because there could be other things going on.
There could be genetic predispositions we don't know about, or even things that happen later in his life.
So many factors we can't fully untangle.
It's hard to pinpoint the exact cause with just one case study.
Makes sense. Even though Gashu's story is so compelling, we have to be careful about making big generalizations.
Or assuming we know exactly what caused his issues.
It's a reminder to stay critical even when a story is very moving.
Absolutely.
Now, there's another interesting case study in our source material.
Oh yeah, Susan and the self-management training.
What's that all about?
So Susan went to therapy because she felt like she had a bad memory, had trouble learning new things.
She basically felt stupid. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah, and lacked self-confidence.
Makes sense why she'd seek help.
It really affected her socially.
Oh, so.
Like she'd avoid conversations about books or movies.
Afraid of sounding dumb.
Wow, exactly. But here's the kicker.
Okay, I'm listening.
She took an IQ test, and her verbal IQ was about 120.
Wait, 120? That's not stupid at all.
Shows how much our own perceptions can hold us back, right?
For sure. So what did her therapist suggest?
A unique approach
Right.
called self-management training, or SMT.
SMT, okay.
The idea is the client becomes their own therapist.
That sounds interesting. So how does that actually work?
So Susan and the therapist work together to figure out specific goals, like stating her opinions more,
Makes sense.
asking for clarification when she didn't understand something, admitting when she didn't know something.
Stuff she struggled with before.
Yeah, and then she practiced these things.
Using therapy.
Yes, and with homework assignments.
So very hands-on.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And the results were pretty remarkable. After just 5 sessions, she finished this tough work assignment without all her usual anxiety,
Wow, that's quick.
and she kept taking more and more control of her therapy.
Like setting her own goals.
Yep, even designing her own homework. The therapist was more like a guide.
She really did become her own therapist.
You could say that. And it wasn't just in therapy. These changes stuck around. Even months later, she was still more confident, better at social interactions.
That's great.
Yeah, she was even comfortable admitting she didn't understand things, which used to be a big fear.
What a transformation. Makes you wonder, are there tons of other great therapies out there just waiting to be discovered?
That's another benefit of case studies.
They can lead to new treatments.
Exactly, they spark innovation.
But even with Susan's great results, can we be 100% sure that it was the SMT that caused them?
That's the tricky part, again. It's hard to completely rule out other factors.
Like maybe it was the therapist's support?
Could be. Or the impact of realizing her IQ was actually high.
Or maybe it was all of those things combined.
Right. It's complex.
And there's another thing to consider. Bias.
Ah, yes.
How does bias come into play?
Well, the therapist really believed in SMT, but that enthusiasm could have, even unconsciously, affected how he saw Susan's progress.
So even with good intentions, things can get a bit skewed.
Exactly.
And then there's the question of, will this work for everyone?
The generalizability, right?
Yeah. Can we assume SMT will be equally effective for anyone struggling with similar issues?
It depends. Everyone's different.
That's true.
Some things, like personality, vary a lot between people.
Right.
Other things, like basic brain processes, those are more universal.
So it's not a simple yes or no answer.
Not really. It depends on how unique the person's situation is. And what we're studying, of course.
Got it. So case studies are super valuable.
Definitely.
They give us great ideas, let us study rare things.
Even challenge old theories we thought were set in stone.
But they're not perfect for proving cause and effect.
Or saying something will work for everyone.
Right. Got to stay critical. But what if we want more control, more proof that a treatment causes a specific change?
That's where single case experiments come in.
Okay, let's dive into those next.
They're kind of a mix, you know?
Of case studies and experiments.
Yeah, we get that deep dive into one person's experience.
But with more control, like we're actually testing something.
Exactly.
Like a personalized experiment.
That's a great way to put it.
Our source, Chapter 9, talks about some cool advantages over group experiments.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
One is that you can really tailor the treatment.
To that individual.
So let's say research says this therapy works for anxiety.
Right.
But a single case experiment lets you see if it works for this person.
Not just people in general.
It's personalized, like medicine.
Makes a lot of sense.
Plus, there are ethical advantages too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Think about group experiments. You often have a control group.
Who don't get the treatment.
Which is kind of a problem if
Yeah.
the treatment could really help.
Big ethical dilemma.
But in single case experiments, the person is their own control.
You're comparing them to themselves.
So smart. Okay, let's get into the specifics. Chapter 9 mentioned the ABA design.
The reversal design, yeah.
What's that all about?
Imagine a kid always besting their spoon on the table.
Driving everyone crazy.
ABA has 4 stages. First, you just watch how much they bang the spoon without doing anything.
So that's the baseline.
The A phase.
Got it.
Then you introduce the treatment. The B.
Maybe you tell them to stop or give them a reward for being quiet.
Right. And you see if the banging decreases.
Does it have an effect?
Then, this is the reversal, you take the treatment away
Back to A.
and see if the banging comes back.
Like turning a switch on and off.
Finally, you introduce treatment again, B.
And watch the behavior.
If the banging goes down when the treatment's on and up when it's off, that's pretty strong evidence.
That the treatment is working.
Not just random chance.
I could almost picture this as a graph. Up and down as the treatment changes.
You got it. But what if the behavior doesn't go back to the baseline when you remove the treatment?
Good question. Does that mean it didn't work?
Not necessarily. Maybe the change is permanent.
Like they learned a new skill.
Exactly. They learn to get attention in a different way, so they keep doing that even without the reminder.
They internalized it.
But there's another possibility. Maybe something else caused the change.
Something we didn't think of.
Maybe the extra attention from adults was the real reason for the improvement.
Not the reminder itself.
So if they keep getting that attention, the behavior stays better even without the specific treatment.
So tricky. This ABA design seems great, but I can see some ethical issues.
Oh, yeah.
Taking away a treatment that's working just to see if the bad behavior comes back.
Makes sense.
Especially if it's something serious.
Like self-harm.
You wouldn't want to do that.
Absolutely not. That's where the multiple baseline design comes in.
Oh, that was in the chapter 2.
It doesn't require removing a good treatment.
How does that work?
Instead of on-off, you compare the treatment across different situations.
Oh,
Imagine Leslie, a child with selective mutism.
mutism.
She talks at home, but not at school or in restaurants.
So the place triggers it.
You got it. In a multiple baseline design, we'd start by watching her in each place.
Restaurants, school, maybe with friends.
Without doing anything yet.
The baseline again.
Then we only start the treatment in one place, like the restaurant,
And keep watching all 3.
but only actively working on the restaurant.
So we're comparing.
If it works, her speech should increase at the restaurant, but not the other places.
Because those are still baseline.
Once there's a change at the restaurant, we start the treatment at school.
but still watching all three.
And finally, we do the treatment with the friends.
So each place gets the treatment, but at different times.
We're looking for improvement only after we start working on that specific place.
It's like a staggered rollout.
If it consistently gets better only after the treatment in each place, that's strong evidence.
That the treatment is the reason, not just time or random stuff.
Exactly. This multiple baseline is pretty neat, right?
It is. No ethical issue, and you get evidence in different contexts. Are there different kinds of multiple baseline studies?
Good question. There's what we just talked about, across settings,
Uh-huh.
but also across individuals and across behaviors.
Give me an example.
Say we have 3 kids, all with selective mutism, but in different places.
Okay.
We could start the treatment for each kid at a different time.
So each kid is their own baseline.
That's across individuals.
It's like repeating the experiment, but with different people.
Exactly. Now, for across behaviors, imagine Leslie also has trouble doing her homework.
2 problems.
We could target them separately, starting treatment for speaking first.
And once that gets better.
Then we start for homework.
Looking for changes linked to the treatment each time.
You got it. Multiple baseline designs are pretty flexible.
But there must be some catches.
Well, of course, no method is perfect.
Right.
One challenge is if a behavior changes before you start the treatment.
Oh, I see.
Let's say Leslie suddenly starts talking at school on her own.
Before we even do anything there.
Exactly.
Like the spoon banging, maybe something else caused it?
It could be a new teacher, something at school, who knows?
Makes it hard to know if the treatment was really the reason she improved.
You got it. We have to be careful about assumptions.
What other challenges are there?
Another is generalization. Say we start the treatment at the restaurant and boom, she starts talking everywhere.
Even though we haven't done the treatment there yet.
It's like the treatment had ripple effects.
So it's hard to know if it was specific to the restaurant.
Or just made her more willing to talk in general.
This is getting complex.
Yeah.
Any other big limitations to think about? When comparing both case studies, Andy's single case experiments, to those big group experiments.
That's a great question. One common criticism is about external validity.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
External validity means, can we take what we learned from this one person or a few people and apply it to a lot of people in the real world?
Ah, so like if we're studying something super rare?
It might be harder to say this will work for everyone.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a valid point. But sometimes these treatments used in single-case experiments, they're really powerful. They cause big changes.
So the bigger the change, the more likely it is that it would apply to others.
It's not a sure thing, but it's something to think about. And don't forget, we can always try to replicate the findings.
Right, do the experiment again with different people.
Exactly. If we keep getting similar results, then we can be more confident that it applies broadly.
It's like one example doesn't prove a rule.
Mhm.
If you see the same thing happening over and over.
Exactly. Plus, with multiple baseline designs, especially across individuals, you've already got that replication built in.
Because you're testing it on different people at the same time.
Right. If the same treatment works for several people, each compared to themselves, it's a good sign that the treatment is doing something.
So we're looking for that consistency, whether it's replicating studies or using clever designs.
Makes sense.
But at the end of the day, no single research method is perfect. Right?
Of course not.
Both single case and those big group designs have their pros and cons.
We just have to be aware of those and choose the right method for the question we're asking.
And that brings us back to you, the listener. Why should all this matter to you?
Well, think about it. We see claims based on single cases all the time.
Oh yeah, like weight loss testimonials.
Or miracle cures, stories of people overcoming huge challenges.
Those personal stories can be really powerful.
They are, but understanding case studies and single case experiments helps you look at those claims with a critical eye.
Like a BS detector for research.
Exactly. Ask yourself, how did they get this information? Was it a real study or just someone's story? Could there be other reasons for the outcome? Can we really say this applies to everyone?
We have to be smart about the information we see, especially with all the anecdotes and testimonials out there.
It's easy to get swept away by a good story.
Don't just take it at face value. Dig a little deeper.
Ask the tough question.
Use what you learned from our deep dive.
Remember, science is always evolving, psychology too. What we learn from one person can spark new research.
And lead to new discoveries.
It helps us understand human behavior better, little by little.
So, big takeaway for today. Case studies and single-case experiments are super valuable tools,
They give us a close-up view, insights we might miss in those big studies.
but they're not without their limitations.
We always have to think critically about cause and effect, bias, and whether the findings apply broadly.
The world of research is full of surprises. Keep exploring, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask, how do they know that?
That's the spirit.
That's all for our deep dive into single-case research. We hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, stay curious.